Chapter 40. Wednesday returned to her desk, but the words on her typewriter no longer made sense. Her fingers hovered over the keys, unmoving. Miss Thornhill's parting words echoed in her mind. "You've always been close to Tyler." It wasn't the implication that unsettled her. It was the fact that Miss Thornhill had chosen that word close. Not friends. Not classmates. Something more intimate. Something that hinted at observation. It made Wednesday feel as if she were being watched even when she wasn't. She shut the typewriter with a soft click. Her lips pressed into a thin line as her eyes drifted toward the window. Morning mist was rolling back into the forest, but her suspicions remained locked in place. Miss Thornhill had to have taken the grimoire. No one else at Nevermore had the motive or the opportunity. And if the monster had been tormenting her, then it was likely for a reason. Hyde was many things: impulsive, chaotic, violent, but rarely without purpose. It was instinctive, primal, yes, but not random. In the kitchen, Lurch was finishing breakfast. A towering figure in a dark apron, he moved with surprising gentleness. The Nevermore staff had gathered, lured by the scent of real food and the creeping dread of the night before. Principal Weems leaned on the counter, eyeing him with a mix of suspicion and curiosity. "He doesn't speak, does he?" she whispered to Coach Vlad. "Not unless it's in dead languages," the coach muttered, mouth full of buttery eggs. Lurch silently placed a tray of perfectly arranged mushroom quiche slices and fresh fruit on the table. He nodded once, then poured freshly brewed coffee into a set of bone-white mugs. Despite themselves, the staff exchanged impressed glances. He moved like a ghost, but cooked like a five-star chef. "What time is he leaving?" asked Miss Tamara, the literature teacher. "Wednesday said 10 sharp, Coach Vlad replied, glancing at the clock. "Said he had chores at the estate." "He's efficient," Principal Weems admitted. "And oddly considerate." "Still creepy," muttered another teacher as Lurch appeared beside her with a tray of warm scones. She yelped and almost dropped her tea. "Does he have to do that?" Miss Tamara asked, clutching her chest. Lurch simply blinked. In the corner, Miss Thornhill sat stiffly, untouched coffee in hand. Her eyes darted to every movement, every corner, every shadow. She hadn't slept. Not really. Not since the Hyde last chased her through the hallways. But there were no scratches. No broken doors. No evidence. Just her own fraying nerves. Wednesday finally descended the stairs, her black backpack slung over one shoulder, her boots echoing with every step. She moved with calm authority, ignoring the stairs that trailed behind her. Principal Weems straightened. "Miss Addams, care to explain your butler's sudden residency at my school?" Wednesday didn't pause. "There was no one here to prepare my meals. I don't trust cafeterias. Or staff. Lurch has higher standards. And he just stayed?" "He leaves at 10, Wednesday replied. "He's punctual. And what have you, Miss Addams? You expect us to believe that you've been simply tormenting the mayor and the sheriff?" Weems asked sharply. Wednesday turned at the door. "Of course, unless there is an even greater mystery that needs solving, that can topple $10 million, she said flatly. "But thank you for your concern." Then she walked out without another word, letting the heavy oak door swing shut behind her. The staff stood in stunned silence. Miss Thornhill finally muttered, "At least she didn't accuse me of anything this time." Coach Vlad raised an eyebrow. "Give it time." Lurch, as if on cue, held out a silver platter of warm chocolate chip cookies and hot milk. One by one, the teachers accepted, unsure whether to be grateful or unnerved. Lurch left later that day. Pilgrim World looked more deserted than usual. The exhibit grounds, once bustling with tourists and schoolchildren, now felt hollow, like a movie set abandoned after filming wrapped. The air was heavy with unease, and even the birds seemed to avoid the area. Wednesday walked ahead, her boots silent against the gravel path. Tyler followed a few steps behind her, hands in his pockets, the worn hoodie he always wore shielding him from the sun. Lucas emerged from the shadows of the old printing press, arms crossed and already scowling. "You shouldn't be here," he said coldly. "Get out before someone calls security." Wednesday didn't even blink. But Tyler stopped, calmly stepping forward to stand between them. "Your dad's on the brink of a lawsuit," Tyler said, voice low but sharp. "If that journal doesn't turn up soon, it could cost the town upwards of $9.7 million. You really think this macho posturing is helping him?" Lucas opened his mouth, but Tyler cut in. "My dad's in trouble too. That's exactly why I'm helping her. We're trying to find whoever took the damn book before the lawyers descend like vultures. You should be doing the same." Lucas faltered for half a second, but his pride kept him upright. "And what if it's already gone? Sold? Burned? You're chasing shadows." One of the reenactors, older, with uneven stubble and a historic badge hanging loosely from his vest, spoke up from behind Lucas. "What makes you think it can even be found?" he muttered. "For all we know, it's already been dumped." Wednesday turned then, slowly, her eyes landing on him with the kind of look that turned blood cold. "Then you'll be out of a job. And this town, this sad colonial fairground, will have nothing left to sell. No tourists. No budget. No mercy." There was a pause. Not long, but long enough for discomfort to spread through the reenactor crew. Lucas's confidence cracked a little more. His lips pressed into a tight line, and he glanced around at his own staff, who were now shifting uneasily. "She's not wrong," Tyler added, his voice now quieter, more persuasive. "All we need is information. Someone had to have seen something the day of the last day exhibit." "Anything." Lucas exhaled, tension bleeding out of his shoulders. He gave a small nod. "I'll ask around. But I'm not doing this for you." "Of course not," Wednesday said, her voice silky and sharp. "You're doing it for survival." She turned without waiting for a reply and made her way toward the storage sheds at the edge of the compound. Tyler followed without a word, though his hand briefly brushed against hers in a silent exchange of resolve. Behind them, Lucas pulled out his phone and started making calls. Sheriff Galpin arrived at Nevermore just past noon, citing a routine follow-up. But Principal Weems and the faculty knew better. Wednesday's persistent reminders of potential lawsuits had finally pushed him to revisit the matter, specifically Miss Thornhill. She was already waiting in the staff lounge, arms crossed, her expression tight with irritation as the sheriff sat across from her. His tone was polite, careful, but firm. "I just need to ask again, Miss Thornhill, about the Wednesday Addams exhibition. Do you recall anything unusual before, during, or after the final day it was on display at Pilgrim World?" Principal Weems, Coach Vlad, and a few other staff members lingered outside the room, pretending not to listen. But they couldn't help exchanging looks when Galpin mentioned how frequently Miss Thornhill had visited the exhibit over the summer. "Every single day?" Coach Vlad whispered, brows raised. "Odd, considering we housed the collection right here for weeks," Weems murmured. "And nothing ever went missing under our watch." The room seemed to shift under the weight of suspicion. Thornhill clearly felt it. "If this is Wednesday's doing," she snapped, her voice sharp with resentment, "then let me be perfectly clear. I had nothing to do with that stolen journal." Sheriff Galpin raised his hands in a calming gesture. "You're not being accused of anything, Miss Thornhill. I just need a full account. Any detail could help." She opened her mouth to respond, but stopped when she noticed a familiar silhouette pass by the open doorway. "Wednesday." The younger Addams didn't slow her stride, but her voice drifted into the room with deliberate clarity. "From my experience, the only people who ever take too much interest in my family are either trying to rob us, kill us, or usually both." "You understand, Miss Thornhill." She paused just long enough to glance at Miss Thornhill. "If someone reports a stalker and that stalker suddenly goes missing, wouldn't your first suspect be the stalker?" And with that, she disappeared down the hallway, her boots tapping a steady rhythm all the way back to her dorm. Silence settled thick in the room. Miss Thornhill's face had gone pale. Sheriff Galpin sighed and flipped his notepad shut. Thank you for your time. But even he didn't quite believe she'd told him everything. That night, the kill was fast, reflexive. She had seen him, and that was all it took. The hide crouched low over the woman's lifeless body, the metallic scent of blood already seeping into the soil. His claws twitched, then started scraping the earth with frenzied precision. 6 feet deep. That was the rule. That was her rule. Wednesdays. We're not in 1620s Jericho anymore. If someone sees you, you know what to do. No hesitation. No one gets away. Not after Thornhill. But Wednesday didn't know. Not really. She didn't know about Thornhill. She had been gone in Alaska last summer when it happened. She left him in Jericho. Alone. Bored. Pacing inside Tyler's body for days until he slipped out into the woods for a hunt. That's when it happened. She appeared. Miss Thornhill, taking one of her usual nature walks. Too quiet for her own good. She caught him mid-transformation, half monster, half human, hovering over the corpse of a mountain lion he'd just torn apart for sport. He remembered the look on her face. Not terror. Not anger. Recognition. She knew what he was. What Tyler was. She ran. He chased. And she got away. She didn't tell anyone yet. But that didn't matter. She could. At any time. And that was enough to keep him up, twitching under his skin every time he felt the walls of Tyler's body tighten around him. One witness. One mistake. And Wednesday didn't even know. Only kill if you're seen, she told him when she returned. And if you do, bury it deep. No exceptions. No one else was allowed to see him. Ever. He didn't tell her about Thornhill. He couldn't. If she knew he'd let someone escape, she might never let him out again. And he was already suffocating. Already clawing at the inside of Tyler's ribs just to breathe. She barely let him out for walks as it was. Not like in 1620s Jericho. Back then, they were equals. Partners. Monsters with purpose. She stood beside him as he tore through witch hunters and pilgrim mobs. They hunted together, killed together, buried together. Back then, there were no rules. No, don't be seen. No hiding in the woods, sneaking out like a feral dog just to kill a rabbit. Now, he needed to keep hidden. He scraped faster, hitting something rough beneath the dirt. Rope. He stopped. She was tied up. Wrists and ankles bound. The fibers were coarse, damp. Whoever left her here hadn't meant for her to get away. He hadn't seen it before, hadn't looked. He was too blinded by the panic. The fear of another mistake. Another Thornhill. Because he knew what happened if someone got away. They threatened him. They threatened her. And he'd protect her at any cost. He buried the body carefully. Clean. Quiet. Just like she taught him, and when he was done, he sat at the base of the tree, claws curling into his palm, staring into the dark woods. No more mistakes. No more witnesses. Miss Thornhill was still breathing. But not for long. Chapter 41. The first day of the fall semester arrived with a predictable sense of dread. Students bustled through the halls of Nevermore, reunited in noise and color. Everything Wednesday loathed before 9 a.m. She hadn't even made it to her dorm when a second-year vampire intercepted her near the quad. Principal Weems wants to see you. Now. Wednesday arched a brow. Did she send a raven, or are you her glorified carrier pigeon? The boy blinked, unsure if it was an insult. Wednesday didn't clarify. She turned and headed to the principal's office without another word. The brass knockers on Principal Weems's office clicked shut behind Wednesday as she stepped inside, her boots deliberately echoing across the floor. Weems looked up from her desk, hands folded, face unreadable. Miss Addams. I was beginning to think you'd developed a habit of dodging mandatory meetings. Wednesday took her usual stance, arms crossed, eyes half-lidded. I don't dodge. I delay. The difference is intention. Weems gestured to the chair across from her. Wednesday didn't sit. Let's not waste each other's time, Weems began. It's a new semester. That means it's time to declare your extracurricular. Again, Wednesday said, tone clipped. Last semester, I carried half the student body across the academic finish line. Some of them even cried. I assumed that counted. It did. Temporarily. That was spring. Weems slid a folder to the edge of the desk. This is fall. So either I join a club or repeat the academic babysitting I was cornered into last time. You weren't cornered, Wednesday. You made a deal. You tutored students, including one from Jericho High, I might add, and raised their grades across the board. Impressively. And now you want me to do it again. I'm offering you the option, Weems corrected. Join a club or resume tutoring. Same credit either way. Wednesday's eyes narrowed slightly. So I can either endure forced socialization or unpaid labor. That's the spirit, Weems said dryly. At least this way, you have a choice. You're dressing up coercion as freedom. Typical administrative trick. Weems smiled faintly. I trust you'll make the least objectionable decision for both of us. There was a long pause. Then, if I find one that doesn't insult my intelligence or require synchronized enthusiasm, I'll join. And if not, then I'll resume my duties as academic executioner, Wednesday said. The tutoring option. But only if your clubs prove unbearable. Very well, Weems said, pleased. Club rosters will be posted this afternoon. Try to contain your excitement. I've already scheduled a moment of despair for later, Wednesday replied. That should cover it. Without waiting for a dismissal, she turned and walked out, coat trailing like a shadow. Weems smiled faintly to herself. Progress. Eden caught up with her in one of the hallways, surprised to find that she was the first one to arrive at school. Is that why you arrived early? Because of Alaska? She asked. Wednesday answered, it was fine, until everything got ruined when my journal got stolen. Is that why you arrived at school early? Eden asked again. That, and I had to get away from all the noise and pollution at home, Wednesday said. Friday's artifacts finally arrived and now my relatives are fighting over which ones they get to keep. Eden nodded, remembering how her family got into a heated argument during the Nevermore exhibition of Friday's artifacts last semester. Ajax joined them and greeted the two. Any lead on who took the journal? That journal being the one stolen from Pilgrim World on the last day of the Wednesday Addams exhibition. The one worth $9.7 million. The one that caused a scandal within the outcast communities. Eden and Ajax still couldn't believe that Wednesday had been carrying it around in her backpack the entire spring semester. I have one suspect, Wednesday said, but the sheriff says it's innocent until proven guilty. She glanced over at Miss Thornhill, who was standing in the corner talking to another teacher. You think Miss Thornhill took it? Eden asked. Tyler said she stayed in Jericho all summer. And a lot of the staff from Pilgrim World, including the mayor's son, they practically saw her every day of the exhibition. She has taken an excessive interest in those artifacts, Wednesday said, which is never a good sign. They turned a corner just in time to see Xavier and Bianca arguing by the lockers. Their voices were sharp, tense, something about trust and being tired. Then they heard Xavier call it quits and walk off, leaving Bianca standing stiff with her arms crossed. Eden glanced sideways. What are you doing later? Going to the weather vane to see Tyler? No. Contact him for me. Tell him I'll be late, Wednesday replied. Eden didn't hesitate. She pulled out her phone and immediately texted Tyler. Principal Weems is making me join a club, Wednesday added flatly, or else it's back to the tutoring sessions. But you're still gonna tutor, right? Ajax asked. I was coerced to do it because I didn't have a club activity for the second half of the semester, Wednesday said. I'm determined not to remain unpaid for my labor. Does that mean you'll still tutor if we pay? Eden asked, almost desperately. Wednesday stared at her. You need better study habits. But you make everything easier to understand, Ajax said. Then tell the school to pick better teachers, Wednesday said, and walked off. After classes ended on the first day, Wednesday immediately set out to check the clubs. The choir made her ears bleed. The archery club might have been bearable, but Xavier was there, moody, brooding, so she turned right around. The dance club? Not even worth a glance. Then she heard a rumor. Eugene had just started a beekeeping club. She found it nestled far from the main school building, practically on the outer perimeter. Eugene explained that a teacher had told him to keep it that way, and he didn't argue. Wednesday didn't mind the swarms or the buzzing. In fact, she had her own insect collection back home. Eugene was practically ecstatic when she agreed to join. Unfortunately, the visit made her late for her usual coffee run. She arrived at the weather vane at 4. Tyler was already waiting. She sat down across from him and said, "I might arrive late during certain days of the week because of a club activity." He raised a brow. "What club?" "Beekeeping," she answered flatly. "Why didn't you join a club last semester?" "I did. Fencing team. Then I quit as soon as we won and my obligations were over. But apparently club activities are part of the school curriculum now. So Principal Weems made me host a tutoring session to cover my club credits for the second half of that semester." "You're still going to tutor me during exams, right?" he asked, grinning. "Gives you the perfect excuse to come over to my house." Wednesday just nodded. "As long as you keep your shift." Just then, Sheriff Galpin walked in the door, going table to table, showing people his phone and asking questions. Eventually, he made his way to their booth and held up his phone. "Either of you seen her around?" They shook their heads in unison. Donovan exhaled. "We're going to look for her in the woods. Just in case." "Maybe she just left town," Tyler offered. "Without her car," the sheriff added. He gave Wednesday a long look. "We're still looking for the journal, but this takes precedence for the next 42 to 72 hours. "Go ahead," Wednesday said. When he left, Wednesday turned her eyes to Tyler. Her voice dropped low. "Did she see you?" Tyler moved closer beside her. It wasn't him speaking anymore, it was the hide. "I only noticed it after I had already unalived her, but that woman, she was tied up and gagged. Someone left her there." Wednesday didn't flinch. She leaned in and whispered, "Did you bury her in the exact place you attacked her?" "Yes," he said, quietly, close to her ear. "Do you remember where?" He nodded once. Wednesday and Tyler drove back to Nevermore in silence. On the way, they passed several signs nailed to trees and fences. "Stay out of the woods. Bear sightings." Tyler didn't comment, but his jaw tightened. When they reached the gates of the school, he parked just outside and started walking alongside Wednesday toward the familiar trail where he usually hunted. "Why'd you leave your phone?" Wednesday asked, eyes scanning the tree line. "My dad made me install a tracking app," the hide said through Tyler's mouth. She glanced at him. "Did you leave it at home during the tutoring sessions last semester?" "Yeah." They hiked in deeper. The familiar trail was quiet, too quiet. When they finally reached the clearing, Wednesday stopped cold. Her eyes narrowed at the ground. "You didn't cover it up properly," she said. "The brush is cleared. And look at that depression, too deep." "I did cover it," the hide muttered, frowning. "Perfectly." She dropped to her knees and sifted through the dirt. The soil was loose, uneven, as if it had just been filled in. Then she spotted something else. Footprints. Too many. Not just hers. Not just Tyler's. "Someone dug her up," she said flatly. The hide tensed beside her. "Want me to dig it up?" "Just to be sure." "No," she stood. "We'll wait. If the body turns up elsewhere, we'll know." Whoever left her probably left her here to make it look like another bear attack. They're trying to see if she'd come back alive. "Why would they do that?" the hide asked, his voice low. Wednesday stared at him, sharp and focused. She'd been in that spot for hours. Whoever found her waited too long. "Next time, bury them somewhere else. Not where you strike." The hide let out a slow breath, like he'd been holding it the entire walk. "I thought you were going to tell me to stop killing them." "If you're sure they didn't see you," she said. "I'm sure," the hide replied, then paused, pointing just past the tree line. Something pale was barely visible in the brush. Wednesday's eyes followed. A limb. Maybe a piece of clothing. Maybe something worse. "We need to leave," she said quickly, "before your dad gets here." They turned and disappeared into the woods, shadows folding in behind them as thunder and lightning hover above them. Rain hammered the forest floor, washing away footprints and any lingering scent. Wednesday was quietly grateful. As she trudged through the Nevermore gates, soaked to the bone, she gave one last glance over her shoulder before telling the hide, "Stay low. At least until we know what conclusion your father comes to after the initial investigation." He gave a curt nod before turning and disappearing back down the winding road, water slicking off his windshield as his car vanished into the sheets of rain. Inside the woods, however, the scene was anything but clean. Sheriff Donovan Galpin and his team pushed deeper into the trees, flashlights sweeping left to right through the downpour. The rain made everything feel colder, heavier, wrong. The bloodhounds suddenly jerked against their leashes, growling and straining as they approached a patch of overturned soil. "Hold them back," Donovan said, stepping forward. The ground was a mess, freshly disturbed dirt pockmarked with puddles and smeared mud, like someone had dug hastily, nervously. It didn't take long. One of the dogs began digging, whining as it unearthed something white, slick, and unmistakably human. A severed arm, pale and wet under the beam of his flashlight. Donovan swore under his breath. Another shout came from a nearby deputy. "Sir, over here." They spread out. Pieces. That's all there were, pieces. Scattered limbs. A ribcage barely beneath the surface, its edges still red with exposed marrow. A portion of a face, waterlogged, slack-jawed, and ghostly pale, stared upward like it had seen the sky last. Someone had attempted to rebury her, but did so with no real effort. The hole was shallow, rushed to perhaps dug just hours ago, now caving in under the weight of the storm. Donovan knelt beside what looked like a leg, the kneecap barely visible under a thin layer of runoff. He didn't flinch. He had seen worse, but this was deliberate. Lightning split the sky. A few days later, the sheriff's office was dim, lit mostly by the gray stormlight filtering through the blinds. Rain tapped restlessly at the windows, as if impatient for answers too. Wednesday and Tyler stood near the front desk, raindrops still dripping from their coats. "We're here to ask about my journal," Wednesday began, her tone calm but sharp. "Any progress?" Donovan Galpin didn't bother hiding his frustration. "We're prioritizing a missing persons case, not a lost antique. It's no longer a missing person if you already found a body." "I heard the victim's body parts were scattered." "Some buried," Wednesday said, eyes landing on a file left open on the desk. Without asking, she picked it up and flipped through the pages. "Any oddities?" "That's classified." His tone snapped. "You don't get to dig through murder investigations just because you're bored." "You're right," Wednesday said flatly, not looking up from the file. "I should probably just ask for that 10 million now." "What the hell did you just say?" Donovan barked, stepping forward. Tyler immediately moved between them, his body tensing as his hand dropped instinctively to Wednesday's waist, pulling her slightly back and closer toward him. "She didn't mean anything by it," Tyler said, voice deeper, rougher, wrong for a moment. Wednesday's eyes flicked up to his face. That tone, that look. The hide was slipping through. But just as fast, Tyler blinked as if shaking off a haze. "She was just curious." "You don't need to go off on her like that." Donovan's gaze narrowed, not at Wednesday now, but at the way his son held her. Protective. Possessive. 1,000 questions crowded his mind, but he said only, "There's one thing odd. Some body parts still missing. Could be the bear, or not." Wednesday's hand stopped on a line in the autopsy report, ligature marks on the wrists and ankles. Restraint. Deliberate. Her brows knit, then she closed the file and set it back down with the same eerie calm she always carried. "Thanks," she said coolly, then walked out, Tyler silently at her side. The rain hadn't stopped. Hours later, Donovan returned home soaked and exhausted. The long day had worn on him more than most. Between Wednesday threatening litigation over her missing journal, again, and the grotesque details of the new case, all he wanted was silence and sleep. He trudged down the hallway, peeling off his jacket, and opened Tyler's door without knocking. Then stopped. Blankets rustled. Clothes, 2 sets, lay scattered across the floor. Beneath the sheets, he saw them, his son, shirtless, his arms instinctively wrapping tighter around Wednesday as she stirred slightly, then pulled the blanket over her head in annoyance. "Dad, what the hell?" Tyler said, his voice sharp but low as he reached to pull the covers higher. Donovan just stood there for a moment, stunned. "You've got to be kidding me." The room fell into a familiar storm of yelling. Tyler sat up, voice rising to meet his father's, while Wednesday stayed nestled under the blanket, unmoved. Eyes closed, trying to block out all the noise except for outside. The rain continued to fall. Chapter 42. "Get dressed," Donovan barked, slamming the door. A few minutes later, Wednesday descended the stairs with Tyler, who looked entirely too pleased with himself. Donovan stared, fists clenched. Wednesday met his glare with clinical indifference. "I find it odd that you're shocked," she said flatly. "We were merely experimenting with the exchange of bodily fluids." "Safely." "Jesus," Donovan muttered, rubbing his temples. "I'm driving her back," Tyler said, already pulling out the keys. They stepped out into the rain, the downpour smothering the awkward tension. Inside the car, headlights cutting through the storm. "Someone died this morning," the hide said, tone casual, eyes flicking toward Wednesday. "Got himself caught in one of the old man's bear traps. Right before the rain started." Wednesday's gaze didn't move from the windshield. "So, I just rewarded your disobedience." No. You said to lay low until the old man finished poking around," he replied, voice tinged with mockery. "And I did. I only went hunting after he got those files from the coroner." He smirked. "Come on, Roach." I was itching to stretch. "Not my fault people ignore all those keep-out signs." She blinked slowly. "When forensics come back, I want to see them." He raised a brow. "You think the stiff is connected to your missing grimoire?" "Yes," she said. "There's a resurrection spell for cracked stone inside. It requires specific body parts. If this victim is missing anything, it means that whoever is baiting you with those bodies is the thief, and they have the book. And they know the eclipse is the deadline." The hide leaned back in the driver's seat, knuckles tapping the steering wheel. "So, you want me to stop killing until the eclipse passes?" "If the person with the grimoire is desperate, they won't wait for you," Wednesday replied. "They'll collect the body parts themselves." She turned to him, voice sharp. "If you catch a scent, walk away. We are not going to be a pawn in their game." "Isn't that a little counterproductive?" he said with a grin. "If I stay out of it, how are you going to catch your little necromancer?" Wednesday paused. She hated when he made sense. "Fine. Track them," she allowed. "But don't kill unless there's a direct connection to the grimoire." He laughed, voice dipping into something darker. "Yes, master. Whatever you say, master." Wednesday didn't blink. "Mock me again, and I'll consider sewing your mouth shut." The hide only smiled. Rain pounded the windshield as the forest blurred past them, dark and waiting. It was high noon, but the forest still felt cold. The smell of wet earth and rot hung in the air like a film, heavy, unmoving. Sheriff Galpin stood at the edge of the newest crime scene, boots sinking slightly into soft, rain-soaked soil. "This makes 3, his deputy said quietly, as if afraid to disturb something ancient. "And it's barely been 2 weeks. A blue tarp covered most of the body, but not the leg, the mangled one still caught in a rusted bear snare, its metal teeth sunk deep into bloated flesh. It wasn't the trap that made Galpin's stomach turn. It was how carelessly the body had been buried. No more than a few inches of dirt had been scraped over it, as if whoever did it had run out of time, or just didn't care anymore. No tracks, the forensics tech confirmed, walking up. Ground's too saturated. The rain hit less than an hour after estimated time of death. Everything's been washed clean. Of course it had. Galpin rubbed a hand over his jaw. 'Cause of death. Hard to say. Ripped apart. Maybe blood loss. Maybe shock. There's signs he was alive when the leg got caught. He exhaled slowly. That meant the victim had time to scream. And no one heard him. The woods were quiet now. Too quiet. No insects. No birdsong. Just the soft rustle of damp leaves and the squelch of rubber boots shifting in the mud. The rest of the limbs, arms, fingers, even part of the jaw, had been found scattered in a lazy arc, some close, some far, like a macabre breadcrumb trail that led nowhere. There was no logic to the way the body was torn apart. It looked chaotic, rushed. But Galpin knew better. Chaos was a mask. He crouched near the leg, studying the edges of the wound. The trap wasn't set accidentally. Look at the angle. It was placed deliberately. His deputy swallowed. Like bait. Up in the trees, thing didn't move. Perched on a mossy branch like a silent sentinel, the disembodied hand clung to the bark with fingers curled, listening. Watching. The shed stood, tucked into a clearing at the edge of the Nevermore property, where school rules faded into wild woods and buzzing things moved without permission. Smoke curled lazily from the metal cylinder in Eugene's gloved hand, spiraling up toward the trees. Easy does it, he said as he puffed toward the open hive. Wednesday stood beside him, sleeves rolled up, surgical knife in hand. Her expression was flat, as always, but her movements were clean, precise. She lifted a wooden frame from the hive, thick with honeycomb, and held it over a tray. The comb oozed golden honey as she sliced through the wax caps with the warm uncapping knife. A second tray collected the drippings, slow and viscous. The bees love this spot, Eugene muttered. No noise, no people, no one poking around. It's almost poetic, Wednesday replied. A secluded place to harvest life, just a few yards from where someone was torn apart in the same forest. Eugene chuckled nervously. You make it weird every time. Just then, the sharp tap-tap-tap of fingers on wood cut through the silence. They both turned. Thing was perched on the wooden harvest table, damp from its sprint, tapping frantically, fingers flying in fast, jarring gestures. Wednesday read the signs instantly. Her eyes narrowed. Eugene frowned. What's he saying? She didn't look away. The sheriff and his team are in the woods again. Probably found another body. Again? Eugene asked, voice rising. That's the third human, she said. Fourth if you count the dog. And no one ever counts the dogs. Thing slapped the table again, a final, urgent beat. Then he curled into himself, a silent huddle of nerves. The body was disturbed, Wednesday muttered to herself. Someone went back. She placed the sticky blade down on the edge of the tray, eyes scanning the tree line beyond the shed. Eugene, still processing, glanced at her. Wait, are you saying someone's stealing parts or something? Wednesday didn't answer. The bees hummed behind them, calm and unaware, busy filling their world with sweetness. But in the woods just beyond, something else was busy too. Rain pattered softly against the window of the weather vane, blurring the view outside like watercolor gone wrong. Wednesday sat alone in her usual booth, the ceramic mug of coffee in her hand cooling with each minute. She didn't sip. She watched. Through the window, the streets shimmered, wet, slick, half reflecting the gray, overcast sky. Across the road, Miss Thornhill stood by a flower stall, her hair damp, her smile too tight. She lifted a hand and waved, nerves twitching behind her eyes. Wednesday didn't return the wave. She simply stared. The bell above the cafe door jingled faintly behind her. She stood, slipping her coat back on without a word. By the time Tyler reached the car, she was already waiting. They drove for a while in silence, the kind that pressed on the glass and filled the space between thoughts. Halfway down a quiet road flanked by pine trees, he shifted. Tyler's fingers tightened on the steering wheel, his posture subtly changing. Not tense, predatory. The hide had taken over. You want me to move the body somewhere else after I killed them? He asked casually, voice lower, more amused than remorseful. Wednesday didn't blink. No. Next time, don't take the bait. Wait for the necromancer to arrive. The hide let out a short breath, something between a laugh and a growl. You still want to play this game of patience? I want my grimoire, Wednesday replied. And if you kill the puppet, I lose the trail to the puppeteer. Her voice was ice. She still hadn't looked at him. Her eyes were still fixed on the mirror, watching Miss Thornhill shrink behind them in the rain. The hide also stared at Miss Thornhill before saying, You want me to hurt him? You can hurt him, she said, finally turning toward him, her tone flat. Just don't break him. The hide smiled, slow, sharp. Yes, cockroach, understood my little cockroach.